What's up, everybody? Jack here with DevSlopes.com again. Back to our API course. And today we are going to kick off our iOS client application development. But there's something we need to do first. And we need to make a few adjustments to our API. And frankly, that's one of the best things about having your own API, is that you're not limited to what you're provided. You can make changes. You can shape it and mold it into whatever you need it to be. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. Now this is our API. And this code here is from it's the last code. It's part of the resources in the course. So if you'll remember in when we deployed to DigitalOcean, we went in here to our main route and we added this /API on the front. So that's one change, and this is for Nginx routing. Now for this client application, we're going to run, we're actually going to run the server on our local development machine here. But to apply this to a live server app, all you need to do is just change the URL is all. But we are going to run this locally here on our dev machine, and we'll build it out and we'll show you how it's done. So changes here. We need, of course, we need this API in here. I already said that. And we need to go to our food truck controller. And we need to lock down these post routes. And if you'll remember from the course on this get route here, I put this authenticate in. We can take that out. And basically what I'm doing is I'm making routes that are get requests or that are going to be returning data are going to be open, and anything that we have to post or put data to, we're going to lock it down or delete. So we've got a post here, so I'm going to add an authenticate in here. This delete here, we need an authenticate. And here we've got a put request, so we're going to authenticate there. Here's another post request. We want to authenticate. And then here we're getting reviews, so we don't want to authenticate there. So at this point, by doing that, what we've got are all of our read routes. We can get food trucks, we can get reviews, all of that, but we have to authenticate if we're going to post any data or delete any data. So that's where we're going to start. Now something else is we're going to redo our delete call here. The way we structured this is it just basically you pass in an ID and it just assumes that that's correct and that there is a food truck that exists by that ID. If you pass in just some random data, it's not going to delete anything and it doesn't tell you otherwise. And you could also even pass in something that's not an object ID and it could crash your server. Now, with that being said, if you're running it with PM2 or NodeMon or something like that, the server will restart. So it's not an issue, but we are going to add something in here. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to start off by doing a find. So we just need to start off with foodtruck.findByID. And then we need to pass in the ID from the URL. And we've got our fat arrow function here again. Alright. So then at this point, what we need to do is we need to take this whole block that we had before, cut that, and paste it in here. And we also need to re-indent. Well, it re-indented for us, it looks like. So now what we're doing is we are find by ID first, so we're finding a food truck. And then at that point, we can go ahead and check for an error. And I'm also going to do something a little different here that we didn't do in the main part of the course. And that is I'm going to send a status. Now what we just did is if we get an error in this find by ID here, we're going to return a status code of 500. And this syntax here where you go response.status and then you provide a value, that sends back your, you know how we talked about the 200 OK and so forth? Well, you can put this status on here and it will send back the numeric code for that status. And then you can just chain on a .send and pass in your error there. So that's how we're going to handle that. And then after that, we're going to say if, actually, after we return that, if we get an error, we're going to go ahead and return here. And what the return statement does is if we reach this point, it's going to halt execution on this call here and kick us back out. So basically, we're not going to continue running this code if we hit this point. Now, here we can say if food truck is null. So right here in this find by ID, we're either going to get back an error or food truck or nothing. If we didn't find it, then this food truck is going to be null. So if the food truck is null, we're going to say res.status, and we're going to return 404, which you can look up these HTTP status codes, but 404 means not found. So we're going to pass, we're going to send back 404, and then food truck not found. And then at that point, we're going to go ahead and return to kick us out of this again. Okay, so at this point, if we reach this point right here, we know, number one, we did not receive an error, and number two, that we do have a food truck because it's not null. At that point, we can go ahead and continue on with the rest of our call the way we did. Now, in this area here, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to do a status. And we'll just do 500. And we'll send the error. And we'll go ahead and return out of that. Now, the reason I put return here, if we get an error here and we send the error back or whatever, if we don't put this return, it's going to go ahead and try to remove here. And it's going to try to set some headers again, and you may get an error in your application may crash. Now, like I said, that's not a big deal with PM2 or whatever because it'll keep it running. But if we put this return statement in here, if we get an error here, it'll kick us out and we won't get any kind of errors. Now, I'm not so concerned about this review.remove because food truck may either, it may have a review or it may not. If it does, it's going to remove it. If it doesn't, then nothing's going to happen. So that's how we're going to leave that. Okay, so another change we're going to make from what we did different in the course, I'm going to come to my my food truck model. And you remember how we put these coordinates here as just an array of a number? Well, that's not going to work for what I need. What I need values for latitude and longitude. So I'm going to replace this number array here with another object. And we're going to say lat is a number and long is a number. So now instead of an array of type number, we're going to have actual keys here for lat and long, which is what we need. And now that we've made that change, I'm going to save it and we'll come back to our controller. And right here you see we've got this this coordinates here. Now we need to change this to .lat, and we need to add .lat out here. And then we need to add a new line for our long. Okay, so with that little change, now we're going to get back a lat and a long. So we made that change here, but we're also going to have to make it right here. So we need to add, we need .lat here. All right, so we've added in latitude and longitude instead of just having an array. So that's good. We added the /API on the front of our route. And then we locked down all of our post routes. So all we've got open are read routes only. And let me just look back through here real quick and make sure everything else looks all right. I believe so. We don't need to change anything on reviews. Now, one other thing that has come up since the course has been out, when you run the application, and a lot of times you'll get a warning stating that Mongooses default promise library is deprecated. Now, that's just a warning. It doesn't affect anything because we're not using promises. Promises are just an alternate syntax, and they're a way to deal with asynchronous calls. The way we've got things nested in here, this is how we handle async calls in this course. So we're not using promises, we're using callbacks. But in order to silence that warning, one thing we can do is in our DB file here, above our let DB equal line, right in here we can put the line mongoose.promise equals global.promise. Close that off and save it. Now, just by putting this line in here, we won't get that warning anymore because it's telling Mongoose what promise library to use. Like I said, we're not using them. It doesn't really matter, but that will silence that warning. So let's go ahead and move on. So another thing that came up in some of the discussion on the course talked about Babel, and back in one of the earlier lessons, I ran Babel straight from the command line. Well, I had Babel installed as a global package, which actually you can do it that way. It's not a problem, but they really recommend that you install it as a local package with save dev or whatever. And the reason being is because you may need to use different versions of Babel for different projects that you're working on. So let me just show you what I'm talking about here. So I'm in my my folder here, our project folder. Now I've uninstalled it as a global package. So if I do babel-v, I get command not found. Now the way you have to run it, if you've got it installed as a local project package instead of globally, is you can run /node_modules/.bin/babel. And if you run it that way, actually, we'll run it with -h. So if you put the path in front, the /node_modules/.bin/babel, that's where the executable is. Now, with that being said, in your package.json file, right here where we've got it specified, right here, let's just Babel node, and right here we've got just Babel. You don't have to put the full path in your package.json file for your scripts, because Node knows that if you've got these here, then it's going to look to your Node modules folder. It'll look there, it'll look globally, and it'll also look there. So you don't have to specify the path here, only if you want to run it from the command line. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of confusion there. All right, so I think that takes care of our changes we needed to make. To our API. So let me just see here. We'll go ahead and build this, and then I'm going to run it dev. Actually, and this is another thing. When you run this, be sure Mongo is running. If you installed Mongo as just a standalone, in other words, you're not starting it up with your services or whatever, you have to run MongoD to fire up Mongo first. So I'm going to run npm run dev and make sure that we're fired up and good to go. It looks like we're running on port 3005. So right now everything looks good. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and move on, and we're going to get started creating our iOS application. We'll see you over the next video.